We're proud to say you're a Pokemon master. You've conquered the Sinnoh region, and you spent countless hours in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. You've seen every Pokemon here, and you likely know which Pokemon are the best without second thought. Now you need something new to explore, because you felt we've been missing something that's waiting to be uncovered. You don't want to hear which Pokemon are the best for competitive battles, speedruns, Nuzlockes, or even casual playthroughs. You want to learn which Pokemon have the largest impact on the games themselves. Not just how they impact how you play these games, but also how you experience them. Today, you're going to find out how these 10 Pokemon shaped your journey. Are you ready? It's time to return to Sinnoh. So drink some water, do your stretches, and let's get started. We'll start with a Pokemon that's won your heart and the hearts of many. This Pokemon appears early in your journey, and its cry echoes endlessly in the minds of everyone who's ever heard it. That Pokemon is Bidoof. Bidoof is a Pokemon that's likely been on your team, not just because it's a Route 1 Pokemon, but because, let's be honest, everyone had the same Sinnoh team. If you're like me, you probably formed the majority of your team by the time you get your first or second badge. But out of all the Pokemon available by the time you reach Oreburgh City Gym, Bidoof is the only Pokemon that can learn every HM by the time it evolves into Bibarel. But what's that? Oh, that's right. So, Bidoof and Bibarel are the only Pokemon that learn every mandatory HM, because Fly and Fog, as useful as they are, aren't needed to complete the game. And even though it can only learn 4 moves at once, by the time you need Waterfall, you no longer need Cut. This sets Bidoof and Bibarel squarely as an HM slave, which is a negative sounding fan term for a Pokemon whose only purpose is to use field moves, and occasionally take hits while you search your bag for revives. But we often overlook that Bidoof is an HM slave by design. You're required to use Rock Smash to move on after Oreburgh City, and out of all of your Pokemon that can learn it at this point, most of the others are far better suited for battling. Even if you decide to give it to Monferno or Machop at first, you'll likely second guess yourself once you get cut at Eterna City. Since HMs can't be forgotten manually, giving your battlers field moves can potentially force you to give up a much better moveset later on. So Bidoof is there to ensure you never have to worry about that. Even if it spends half the time in the box while you're battling gyms, it knows its role in the world, and it's proud of it. While Bidoof's impact is clearly visible to all, the 9th most important Pokemon is far more subtle, but also far more profound and all-encompassing. This Pokemon is none other than Arceus, the creation Pokemon. Arceus stands out because it affects every aspect of Sinnoh, and that feels obvious because it's a mythical Pokemon related to all 3 box legendaries, and legendaries and mythicals heavily affect the world building of their region. But Arceus is different. Sinnoh is affected by Arceus' existence at a far greater scale than other regions are affected by their Pokemon. Where other legends tell how their region was formed by their legendary Pokemon, Sinnoh tells us how Arceus created the world. The world building isn't just in conversations or landmarks, but in collectible items you can find throughout the region. And when you do, you get a piece of a legend that fits together like a puzzle. If you happen to obtain Arceus, you can give these items to it and change its type at will. For the first time ever, too. This makes it the most customizable Pokemon at this point in the series, besides Mew and Smeargle. But even if you never meet Arceus, you're directly affected by its creations. As we said, all 3 box legendaries were created by it. And it has another legendary trio in the Lake Spirits. And all 6 of these Pokemon both directly and indirectly affect the landscape of the region. Not just because of the literal lakes, but also because of that giant mountain that bisects the map. But really, Arceus' influence is everywhere. Its plates are scattered throughout the region, and it and its legendary trios have far more statues, myths, and landmarks than any other Pokemon group. One of the landmarks is a literal church, which is extremely fitting for the Pokemon equivalent of God. Arceus squarely deserves its spot as one of the most important Pokemon for its world building alone. Arceus' main purpose is to create a mystery for you to uncover over time, and you do that not by battling or playing through the story, but by exploring the world and discovering new details bit by bit. The reason it's only at number 9 is because its impact on your experience doesn't directly involve it, or at least, it doesn't need to. The next Pokemon, however, is a little more direct. The 8th most important Pokemon is pretty unforgettable, Lucario. Like Bidoof and Bibarel, it sits on the list of Pokemon you definitely had on your team, but that's where the similarities end. Lucario was one of the first Gen 4 Pokemon revealed, and it played a pretty huge role in the marketing before Diamond and Pearl came out. But even within the games in isolation, Lucario was a Pokemon you had to get on your team, and the game constantly teased you with it. While Bidoof basically walked up to you as soon as you stepped outside your front door, Lucario required actual detective work to find. Before you even have the chance to get one, you're introduced to its power in Maylane's fight, and if you're not prepared, your Lucario can easily sweep your team. This battle serves as a preview in the same way that the trailers and movies showcase Lucario. It threw it in your face and made you wonder, how can you get that Pokemon yourself? After that gym battle, if you check your Pokedex, you'll see that it can't be found in the wild, which means it will take more effort to find. If you don't find it, you'll see it again later, in the champion battle where it will definitely sweep your team. Then there's a third trainer with Lucario, Riley. He resembles that character from Lucario's movie, and that served as a hint that you're on the right track. When you finish that character's side quest, he gives you a Pokemon. Sorry, not a Pokemon egg. Now that you have this egg, you have to hatch it. Easy enough. Ride around on your bike, and you have a baby Lucario? Not only is Lucario's pre-evolution, Riolu, level 1, it's unevolved, and you need to find out how to evolve it. Ideally before you go into the Steel Gym, since Steel is weak to fighting, and you know Lucario is fighting type for sure since it was the ace of the fighting type gym. And the Steel Gym's levels are in the 30s, so you better level up Riolu fast. You get the point by now. You had to put in actual effort to get your Lucario. It's your reward for all the hard work you put into getting it, and now you can finally use that Pokemon you saw on TV all those years ago. While there are definitely other Pokemon in the games that require effort and attention to obtain, Lucario is one of the few that you see early on and then build from the ground up. By the time it sits rightfully at the front of your team, it's not just a Pokemon you found or a Pokemon you earned, it's a Pokemon you raised as your own. The patience needed to train a Lucario in these games prepares you for the other Pokemon you'll meet that are much more difficult to find. The 7th most important Pokemon isn't just one Pokemon, but a group of Pokemon. These are the starters and their evolutions, but not your starter, and not your rivals either. Instead, the most important starters are owned by other trainers throughout the region. Diamond and Pearl were the first games after Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald to properly give you the National Dex, but the requirement to get it in these games is unique to the Sinnoh titles and their remakes. While Fire Red and Leaf Green required you to own a specific number of Pokemon, Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum required you to only see them. This difference meant you could obtain the National Dex without catching, trading, or evolving most Pokemon. All you had to do was find them in the wild, battle trainers who had them on their team, and, in the case of some legendaries, see a picture of them. And while you can see all the evolutions of your starter and berry starter just by playing through the story, there's a good chance you'll miss the starter evolutions held by Professor Rowan's assistant. To offset this, NPC trainers are given the Sinnoh starter lines at different points in your journey. It becomes most obvious when you reach the second gym and battle Gardenia, who has a Turtwig on her team. Then, at the Elite Four, you'll find an Infernape in one of the final battles. The other trainers are mostly optional, but this feature means you're rewarded for going out of your way to fight them. On that note, here's a fun fact. Gen 4, 6, and 1 are the only generations to give the starter lines of those generations to NPC characters. Gens 2 and 6 also had you fight trainers who held the Cano lines, but Gen 2 didn't have any trainers who held the Johto lines besides you and Silver. This was a nice touch in the Sinnoh games that made them feel full. It was a good twist on collecting that felt natural to do. Speaking of collecting, the 6th most important Pokemon introduced a new form of collection. This Pokemon is none other than Magikarp. But not just any Magikarp. This Magikarp is only obtainable after you've beaten the game, seen every Pokemon in the Sinnoh Dex, obtained the National Dex, and traveled to the post-game area. Once you're there, you'll find a house on a small island, and inside that house, you'll meet a man who will offer you to trade his Magikarp for your Finneon. If you accept, you'll discover that the Magikarp isn't in your language. Instead, it's in German. Unless you're playing a German copy of the game, then it'll be in Japanese. The man then upgrades your Pokedex once more to support multiple languages. Diamond and Pearl were the first games to take Pokemon World and give it a whole new meaning. These games also introduced online connection to the series, especially through the global trading system. This allowed you to trade with people all over the world at any time, and served as the foundation for all the trading features we have today. What stood out about this Magikarp was that it was one of 14 Pokemon in Diamond and Pearl who had Pokedex entries in other languages. The other Pokemon are Pikachu, Ekans, Psyduck, Ponyta, Staryu, Wobbuffet, Heracross, Sneasel, Teddiursa, Houndour, Wingull, Slakoth, and Roselia. But once Pokemon Platinum came out, every Pokemon was able to have Pokedex entries in other languages. And while languages are known for having different accents and dialects, none of the different language Pokemon had different cries. But you likely know the 5th Pokemon on the list because of its special cry. Chatot. If you know about Chatot, you likely know where this is going. The short version is this. These games introduced Chatot to the series, and they were afraid you were going to use it. When game designers make games, they try to include features that take advantage of the game console they're using. For example, Diamond and Pearl was on the Nintendo DS, and the Pokétch used the DS's touchscreen. But the DS had another feature that Chatot seemingly was designed around, the microphone. Chatot was special because of its signature move, Chatter. Chatter is a standard attack that has a 1% chance to confuse the opponent, but like HM moves, it could also be used as a field move. And if you used it in the field, you could speak directly into the microphone. Chatot would record your voice, and that would become its new cry. And depending on how loud the recording was, it would also increase Chatter's confusion chance from 1% to up to 31%. But they were so afraid you were going to use it that Chatot was banned from online battles. They saw the potential that Chatter could be used to say inappropriate things and banned it preemptively. And as another safeguard, the recording was also automatically distorted, just in case you somehow misused the feature. Since Generation 6, Chatter no longer records your voice, and the ban on Chatot was finally lifted. Chatot was important to Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, and the game series as a whole, because it taught the game designers that sometimes a fun feature becomes more trouble than it's worth. Other Pokemon have used unique features since Gen 4, but none of them made as big an impact as Chatot. That brings us to Pokemon number 4, Roselia. Roselia was a Pokemon that was easy to overlook in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, but when it returned in Diamond and Pearl, it took the region by storm. Not only was it one of the 14 Pokemon with different language Pokedex entries, it also got a baby form and an evolution. To this day, Roselia is the only Pokemon that received both a new pre-evolution and a new evolution at the exact same time. And while that's interesting, how Roselia's evolution line was handled in these games is far, far more interesting. Roselia was super likely to be on your team because, well, it was on everyone's team, but it also served as subtle foreshadowing of what was to come. Generation 4 introduced two groups of Pokemon that I became known for, a whole bunch of babies and a whole bunch of final evolutions. As we said, Roselia happened to get both, and you see both of them early in your adventure. Out of all the Pokemon you can meet before the first badge, Badoo is one of them. This indirectly teaches you something very important. Baby Pokemon can be caught in the wild. Before Diamond and Pearl, baby Pokemon were exclusively found in eggs. And while Pokemon like Riolu were still found in eggs, this change to the series was very welcomed, especially since the games kept track of the Pokeball used to catch it. If you happen to catch a Badoo yourself, the fact that it was a baby Pokemon was more obvious once it evolved into Roselia, which you had already met in Poen. Even if you didn't catch one, plenty of trainers on the way to the second gym had both Badoo and Roselia on their team to help make that connection clear. If you played the Game Boy Advance era of Pokemon games, this was the game sending you a signal. Old Pokemon have new baby forms in this new game. And this was assuming you missed the movie, side game, and anime that featured Munchlax before these games came out. If you somehow only played the main games and had no outside knowledge of Pokemon, Badoo and Roselia were there to help inform you of this new trend. But even if you had outside knowledge, there was very little indication that old Pokemon were getting new evolutions. And while it's kind of expected today, back then, it wasn't a guarantee. While Gen 2 had some evolutions of Gen 1 Pokemon, Gen 3 was largely disconnected from the others. But once you got to the second gym, after you defeated Gardenia's Turtwig, she'd send out her Roserade. This is the first time you see Roserade, and it's a gym leader's ace, like Lucario is later on in your journey. And while you can make the case that Badoo and Roselia don't look like they're from the same evolution line, Roselia and Roserade's connection is as clear as day. This was Roselia's main role in these games, to confirm to you, without a doubt, yes, baby forms are back and in the wild, and yes, new evolutions are here, and you'll be able to get them soon. Finally at the top 3, and the third most important Pokemon in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. It's a Pokemon you know and love, since it's captured the hearts of everyone who's ever seen it. Eevee. Eevee is important in the most indirect ways possible, but it does so much more in these games than you ever gave it credit for. You definitely know that Eevee received 2 new evolutions, and that they introduced a new evolution method to get them. And while that's important in a way, what stands out about Eevee is what it and its other evolutions do. Diamond and Pearl brought back the day-night cycle, which had been absent since Crystal, and although you could evolve Eevee into Espeon and Umbreon in Generation 3, this could only happen in Pokemon XD, which forced you to choose one of the 5 evolutions and locked away the others, or the Hoenn game. But not only did the Hoenn games not have Eevee in it without trading, you couldn't tell what time of day it was without checking the clock you set at the beginning of the game. But the Nintendo DS had a built-in clock, and Eevee was now readily available, even more so in Platinum, where you can obtain it as early as your 3rd badge. And unlike the clocks in Gen 2 and 3, they're very easy to change. This made day and night evolutions like Espeon, Umbreon, Roselia, and Lucario much easier to get than before. But Eevee's impact doesn't end there. It also has its stone evolutions. The evolution stones in these games can be found in mostly random spots throughout Sinnoh, but you can only get a handful of them, at least on the surface. If you want to get more evolution stones, you'll have to go to the underground. You likely discovered this by accident if you ever tried to mine the walls. The underground has a lot to offer if you decide to explore it. By mining, you can find evolution stones, fossils, Arceus plates, and other good items before you get the second badge. The underground also gives you the option to make a super secret base and connect with other players. And talking to enough players and NPCs in the underground gives you the ability to catch Spiritomb. Finally, Diamond and Pearl introduced new evolution stones, and it would make perfect sense for Eevee to use them, but it doesn't. And yet, when you try to use it on Eevee, you may accidentally discover that it works on another Pokemon you definitely had on your team. Eevee is important not just because it has new evolutions, but because its old evolutions indirectly connect so many aspects of the Sinnoh games together. The second most important Pokemon in all of Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum is one you've likely seen, but may or may not have caught as your own. This Pokemon is Regigigas, and it does some pretty awesome and hilarious things throughout Gen 4. When Diamond and Pearl came out, Regigigas had a lot of barricades that stopped you from obtaining it easily. Like Lucario, it took actual effort to get, but unlike Lucario, you needed to get the National Dex first. But even then, it would stay dormant. You definitely know the gimmick, and the game kind of expects you to. Regigigas is the trio master of the Regis from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. The Regi trio is known for their bizarre puzzles that required outside research to solve. But once you did solve them and encountered your Regi, it was so satisfying. Like Chatot, Regigigas encourages you to use the DS's features. In this case, the dual slot feature, which allows you to place a DS game and the Game Boy Advance game into the system at the same time. This allows you to send Pokemon from your Gen 3 games to your Gen 4 games. Regigigas exists mostly to promote this feature, but there's more to it than that. You likely know about its ability, Slow Start. Basically, Regigigas' power is insanely high. Its attack stat is higher than even Arceus, but its ability weakens it. But the fun in using Regigigas is finding out how to bring it to its full potential before its Slow Start ability wears off. Regigigas, in a way, serves as a multi-game puzzle reward. And at the same time, Regigigas itself is a puzzle. It took creative thinking and research to get it, and it takes creative thinking and research to use it in battle. The best part is when you find it in Platinum. You don't need the trio this time. You can just go straight up to Regigigas and fight it. But this time, it's at level 1. And after you catch it, there's a lot more you can do with it than meets the eye. What I personally find the most fun is sending it to another game and using it as your starter. I mean, how often do you get the chance to use an official level 1 legendary in a playthrough? Then there's the Cherish Ball event Regigigas, which allows you to open 3 chambers in Platinum that hold a member of the Regi trio, effectively switching their roles, whether it's a lock or a key, a trio master or a starter, a weakling or a powerhouse. Regigigas gets us thinking and allows multiple parts of the Pokemon world to converge. Here we are, at last, at number 1. Do you know which Pokemon is the most important one? The most important Pokemon in the Gen 4 Sinnoh games is Manaphy, a Pokemon you can't get in the Sinnoh games at all. Like Regigigas, you need to play an entirely different game to unlock it, but unlike Regigigas, you didn't need to beat the Sinnoh games to get it. The reason Manaphy is the most important Pokemon is because of how it broke the established mythical rules. Manaphy was available through an online event in Pokemon Ranger, where you retrieve and protect Manaphy's egg. After you complete the mission, you're able to transfer it to the Gen 4 Sinnoh games, and hatch it into the first level 1 mythical Pokemon ever released. And there was basically no restriction on when you could transfer it. As long as you unlocked Mystery Gift, you could send it from Ranger at any time. And like many of the Pokemon and features we talked about earlier, you can do this before you get your first badge, which is exactly what I did as a kid. But hatching Manaphy was a hint. If Manaphy hatched from an egg, could you get more Manaphy by breeding? That's the line of thinking the games wanted you to have. So you throw Ditto with Manaphy into the daycare, and you'd end up hatching the only mythical Pokemon baby form, Phione. Maybe you could trade them online and get different language Phione? Or maybe you could take these Pokemon, along with your Regigigas, Riolu, and your early game friends, and raise them as your own as you grow together throughout your journey. There's a lot of reasons Manaphy deserves the number 1 spot, but the main reason is simple: hype. Manaphy is the only Pokemon in Pokemon history that you could obtain before its debut game came out. Pokemon Ranger was technically a Gen 3 game, and Manaphy's event was released before Diamond and Pearl. So you, like me, and many other trainers, waited patiently for Gen 4 to start, so we could finally hatch our first Gen 4 Pokemon. And there you have it. These are the 10 most important Pokemon in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Which of these stood out to you? Were there any others you want to include, maybe as an honorable mention? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, you'll also enjoy the videos exclusively available to members on YouTube and Patreon. You can also watch public videos early and get your name in the credits, like the members shown here. Links for both are in the description. Thank you for supporting the channel, and thanks so much for watching.